Hey, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time today to see our webinar, Protecting Employees in the Ramp Up to Busy Season. I'm here at Foundation Software's headquarters, also the headquarters of Safety HQ. We're in, the end of February here. It's February 26th or something along those lines. So we are starting to get in some signs of spring here in Cleveland, Ohio, some 50-degree days, a little bit of warmth. So I know for many of you across the country, those are signs that, we're going to start picking up work, especially as we get into the busy season in the spring, summer, and early fall. So obviously everyone's, line of work changes, everyone's regional location changes and all that. But just generally speaking, this is really a good time for everyone to kind of take stock of what we're doing from a safety perspective, what we can do to potentially improve our safety processes for our employees, and how we can get better. So regardless of where you're at, what you do, either way, it's a good time to check in and see where we're going to go from a safety perspective. So again, my name is Eric Pitardi. Hello, I'm still Eric. This presentation will be recorded. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I will get to as many of them as I can. I know we're kind of over the lunch hour, so I'll do my best to get to as many as we can. But if I don't get to your questions, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to schedule a demo with you, talk through some of these questions or things like that separately. Just let me know, and I'd be happy to help. And perfect. So some of the topics that we will cover today, how to achieve buy-in from the workforce. That typically tends to be one of the most difficult, but it is also kind of like the first step in really implementing some safety processes for your team as we go. We're also going to talk about some different ways to implement, to safely implement some safety compliance items without compromising production. That's the one piece, right? We can do safety, and a lot of people think that that's at odds with actually getting things done. And it shouldn't be, it doesn't need to be. We really need to focus on how we can bring those things together, and your team can do both at the same time. That really, kind of cheating ahead is going to come down to doing things efficiently, effectively, and keeping employees on task. But we'll talk about that a little bit further as we go too. We're also going to talk about some tips for creating consistent results and practices. Consistency is the key here, guys, for everything, right? I talk to a lot of folks that, for example, do a JHA, but we only really do them when we're required to or when this GC asks us to. Well, if that's the case, what kind of message does that send to your employees as you go or ask them to do safety activities on a regular basis? So we're going to talk a lot about consistency throughout the day. That'll come up as we kind of go from section to section. And then obviously all of these are going to kind of lead to how do we drive down incidents and insurance costs. So that's huge. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of you guys, depending on your role, I see some different titles out there. Workers' comp insurance is a huge, huge, huge impact for your business. And, lowering your EMR, your experience modification rating, lowering your number of accidents, what have you, are all critical in lowering that workers' comp. And I guess what we forget about this too is every time you have an incident, you're losing an employee from their production value as well. So there is the human element. We care about all these folks. We don't want anyone to get hurt on the job site. A lot of the companies that we work with, they are almost like a family. So obviously I don't want to disregard the human element by any means, but it's hard as heck to find some folks out there to work for you and to get things done. You can't afford to be losing folks to kind of nonsense or injuries that are preventable and can be avoided. So we'll talk about all those things as we go. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know in the question area. I will do my best to get to as many as I can. If not, we can connect after the webinar. So I'm going to be using Safety HQ today as kind of our guideline. You don't have to use Safety HQ. It's just an example of the safety software. I'm a little biased, but I always recommend having a safety software for a lot of your folks. That gets into a lot of the efficiency processes, what have you. So I'll do my best to explain situations, obviously using Safety HQ as a guide, but what this might look like if you use some other solutions as well too. So we'll kind of certainly use that as we go. And I'm one slide ahead. Let me pull up my Safety HQ instance, and we'll be ready to roll. So, fantastic. Safety HQ, if you guys want a full demo of this, there's another time to do that. I'm gonna skip over a whole bunch of things. But it's an app, right? iPhone, Android, tablet. This is a good way to monitor, communicate with your team, and track safety processes. So for the time being, just see this as, I'm moving this one over. Just see this as a guide. This is something we're going to just use to manage these items. The first thing that I always like to talk about, and this is like step one, if I ask people, what are you doing from a safety perspective? They say, well, we think we're doing some toolbox talks. There might be some toolbox talks that some folks on our team are doing. Maybe they're doing them, maybe they're not. We don't do a good job of tracking them, what have you. Toolbox talks is always the first thing that sets up. And this is going to hit a couple of elements that we talked about on the topics that we'll cover. Number one, this is going to talk about buy-in from the workforce. How is it going to do that? This is going to keep the team and safety top of mind for your team as you go. You can't say safety is important and never talk about it. That doesn't really work. You can't say, hey guys, I really need you to be safe and do all your safety activities and not invest the time, effort, and show that as an important factor. So that's number one. You got to show that that is important. You got to follow up on these items. This is going to apply for all of the items that we're going to address today. If you don't follow up, that shows that these are not important. If they do toolbox talks and you never get that paper back, you never acknowledge that somebody completed them, you don't acknowledge that somebody didn't do them, that shows that you don't really care about those, that they are not a priority. There is no buy-in from the top. You are never going to get any buy-in from your workforce. So whatever safety activities you do and you implement, you absolutely need to make sure that you are following up on these, and this is important for you from the top, whether you're the owner, to the president, to the project manager, whatever, office manager, whatever you might do. If you don't follow up on these things, they are not going to care. Buy-in is out the window. So from our perspective in Safety HQ, we can use toolbox talks in a bunch of different ways. We can do these all in English and Spanish. We can assign these toolbox out. We can allow these toolbox talks to be selected by our group. In this case, I'm just going to schedule this toolbox talk out for the next week. We have about 350 toolbox talks in here. Even if you're using paper, even if you're using another solution, there are a lot of toolbox talks out there, guys. We'll help you with those and put those in there on the Safety HQ side. But even if you're doing this on paper and you're not ready for a safety software, check with your insurance company, check with your trade organization if you belong to one of those. Google, right? I mean, there's some specific topics. It doesn't take that long to just look forward and see a couple of the items, one per week, and you'll keep the team on task and up to date. OSHA's got a ton of these as well too. So there are resources out there. If you have any questions, if you're looking for places, I'd be happy to send you in the right direction for some of these as well too. So I'm using Safety HQ as a guide again. My team's going to get a notification in their inbox. They're going to get an email letting them know they've been assigned a toolbox talk as well. They're going to hit this big yellow, easy to use, easy to find, no excuses button. That's really critical for everything in Safety HQ. Again, pretty biased here, but if this is not simple and easy to do, they are not going to do it. We cannot make their time and effort expand on this. If you're asking them to spend an hour doing a toolbox talk, it's probably just not going to be effective. They know that they're going to have to stay longer in the day to get some work done and completed. We need to make sure that this is efficient. We get right to the point. We get the folks the information that they need. So in this case, I'm going to select my projects. That way I can organize it. I'm obviously going to discuss my toolbox talk with the team. We set these up in a pretty particular format as far as explaining dangers, identifying controls, demonstrating items, and then reviewing questions. Make this engaging. I know it's tough because you might have different groups doing this, project managers, foremen, whatever, but make sure they ask questions, make sure they're following up, make sure they're actually following through with this process. This doesn't have to be somebody just talking to a group and not a collaborative environment. Opening this up to everybody is a really good opportunity to do so. So in this case, I'm going to select some employee names, have them sign off on it. We're really flexible. You can just collect signatures on a sheet. You can take a photo of a group. There's a bunch of ways. We do it this way because this is the strongest record. Should OSHA come knocking, it's going to be tied to the employee record. If Ben's ever involved in an accident, I could see any of that. Great. In Safety HQ, that's done and organized. If you're doing this elsewhere, you need to make sure that you have a plan for getting these back, these paper items back from the team. Whether that's when the foreman or whoever's doing these, the team leaders, comes back to pick up their pay stubs or their checks at the end of the week, whether that's when they come in for a weekly meeting, what have you. the first item needs to be collecting that toolbox talk. Again, we do it automatically. You can do it a couple of different ways if you'd like as well too. We also organize this automatically by project, by who submitted it, by date range, what have you. This is really helpful. Again, even if you're doing this on paper, make sure you organize this, because if you ever, if you just put them in a stack and you need to go back and review this information, it's going to be too difficult. It's going to get lost. You're not going to have a really, convenient way of monitoring these items. So right here, I can go ahead and pull up any toolbox talk from the project for whatever date range I need. I can pull up a nice professional PDF copy. I can share that with whoever needs to review that. Great. I could have my company name, logo on it. You can provide this right to your GC, your customer, whomever, and say, hey, look, safety is a top priority for us. You are working with a professional organization and you can trust us. I talk with a lot of GCs throughout this process as well. That is a really key component to safety, is being able to provide them something, right? They don't want to have to worry about whether you're doing what you need to do from a safety perspective. They got countless subs. Well, it's not countless, but they can find out how many subs they have on the job. If you don't have your stuff in line, they're going to find somebody else. They don't want to have to worry and babysit you and handhold you through this process. So make sure you have your things organized. Make sure it's accessible whenever you need to provide them. And if you do have something, professional that you can provide them, or just a copy of that, that's going to go a long way to make sure we complete those items as well. In Safety HQ, we can follow up and see who's completed these items in real time. This is a demo instance, so my group's not doing very good, but I'm doing fantastic, doing really good. You can notify the team to let them know you need to get that completed, stay on top of them. But whatever you do, this goes back to point number one, find a way to confirm that these folks are completing and following up on this task. If they don't, you're wasting your time, you're wasting their time, and you're really devaluing safety throughout your organization. So I always start with the toolbox talk side. That's kind of a basic, kind of a good place for everyone to kind of meet in the middle. As we get into job site forms and other compliance items, this is a really good place to jump back into this section. So in Safety HQ, we have fully customizable forms. If you have a form that you like already, great, send it to us. We can build it at no additional charge. You can use our templates if you need a place to start, what have you, but find something, right? If you're doing nothing right now, there's really good examples on the internet, JHAs, what have you. The really hard part is finding things that are specific to what you do. And why is that important? That's going to go back to that tip that we talked about, simplifying safety without compromising production. The way we do that is make sure that any of our job site forms, whether it's our JHA, AHA, JSA, our site inspections, our equipment inspections, our DOT inspections, whatever it is, we need to make sure that these items are on task and focused on what matters to them. So I'm going to use a JHA as an example really quickly. I'm going to hit my big yellow button here. Again, same actions to make sure that this is simple and easy to use for the team. Great. Going to go through what I do. So for me, and you have the beauty of this in electronic form, there's no real substitute for this if you're doing this on paper, but I do have some suggestions if you still are. Today, I'm doing setup and loading of materials. If I hit next, that's going to show me all of the hazard types that are specifically related to setup and load of materials. I pick fall protection and environmental as the hazards I'm dealing with. It's going to show me specifically those hazards as we go from there. I'll hit next. And again, this is only now going to show me controls based on the items that I'm dealing with for the day. Excuse me. This is really key in that we are only keeping the team focused on what matters to them for that. If you give them a 7-page JSA and half that stuff's not going to matter, they're going to skip it. The other way you can do it is consolidating that JSA or site inspection. It's just going to require a lot more writing from the team too. So find a way to consolidate that, try and focus in on the tasks that you guys do. Even if you get some forms from a trade organization or what have you, limit these to, hey, this is the type of JSA we do on a job site that does this, or on on our commercial jobs we do this. So maybe we do this JSA. So you can pick it a couple of different ways. Again, we have the beauty in a digital environment to change all those forms as they make selection. They don't have to decide which form is accurate, which options matter to them, which don't. Again, there's no real comp to this in a paper environment. But I can take photos on here. I can mark those photos up. Just a really good way to actually describe what's going on the job site. I've read a number of JSAs and daily logs and things like that from the employees on paper, and I'm sure you guys could say, wow, yeah, I have no idea where he was trying to point out this issue. Sometimes a photo is worth 1,000 words. So again, no real comp in the paper environment, but again, this is part of making this process simple and easy for your team. Collect some signatures. We can use voice to text and things like the comments. I'm going to kind of skip through the rest of this as we go from here. Again, in Safety HQ specifically, this is going to provide a nice professional PDF, just like what we reviewed on the Toolbox Talk side earlier. Company name, logo, share this with your customer, what have you. But take the time, even if you're doing this on paper, put in the headers, brand this to this is your business. This is your organization. This is what represents you out in the construction workspace, right? So if you're passing this along to a GC or what have you, take the extra time, clean it up, make sure it is kind of what you need, and that it represents you guys in a positive light. Again, we have all of those automatically organized by project, date range, what have you. Again, make sure that you keep these organized by project or whatever to make sure that these are readily accessible. Folks aren't waiting on you for weeks to get this information in. It just gives another level of professionalism and preparedness as you go. We have the same tools in here to make sure that these are completed, same as the Toolbox Talks. We can see who's done what, who hasn't done what. Really good way to follow up and make sure that the team's staying accessible. So I'm going to go to a site inspection now, just to give you another example. There's a really important key here, and this is one of the bullet points that we talked about, is staying consistent, right? And I think by staying consistent, we want to eliminate any of the variables that they can put in on something like this. So if they get into a situation in which you're asking them to write something out really long and you do all this, you're going to get a lot of variation. Stay consistent, have them do the same thing project to project, and then let the forms or let what they fill out dictate how we're going to change and evaluate that. So in this case, again, we have the beauty through a smart form in here. So I'll pick like an example. If I'm not dealing with fall protection on this project, good, I'm all set. Or safety harnesses, I should say. If I am dealing with them, okay, I have some additional questions. So it keeps the team focused, and you can remain consistent in your practices of doing Toolbox Talks, JHA, site inspections, even when they're more complex or less complex. We're not sacrificing production, and we're not giving up or lending to any kind of inconsistency as well. Now, in this case, this is another layer of consistency. If you're doing this on paper, if you're doing this outside of a software, make sure you have a process for your team to follow when they run into an issue. A lot of times we'll see folks reluctant to highlight a deficiency if the process is going to be cumbersome, right? In this case, the harnesses are giving us issues, or maybe, I don't know, there's no guardrail cables. I can simply hit add new. We can pre-populate that. We can tag this for data analysis. Maybe I'll assign this to our safety manager, Peter. I can take a photo again, just like I did before, right off my phone or device and say, hey, we got to have this sorted by today. Great, I can continue right on with my inspection. If you ask the team to do too much to highlight a deficiency, to mark that, what have you, they're just simply not going to do it. If you have them go through 7 steps to discuss a particular deficiency or an issue that they're having at a job site, well, a good way to avoid all that extra work is to just not highlight that deficiency at all. So unless you have a safety manager backing up, those things can be really hard to track and manage and see if people are kind of skirting those issues. So what we want to do is really make simplified, easy processes. If I see an issue, I fill out this form or I go through this process, I send this quickly, it's going to go to who it needs to do. That process is going to be organized. I can continue doing what I need to do and focus on my production tasks. Now, in Safety HQ, you'll get a lot of other benefits as well, right? That's all going to save into a to-do list for open items, issues that need to be resolved. You can see this at a project level. You can see this by priority. You can see this by type of form if you want to focus on all these, for certain areas of the business or what have you. You have all these options, and then you're also going to get some reporting aspects in there as well to show you trends, analysis, things like that. That is really key as well, guys. If you can develop any data points, it's much easier with the software, but if you can develop data points and you can track information over time, that shows that, hey, guys, this, to your teams, this really actually does matter. And from another perspective, excuse me, Yeah, it is springtime in Ohio, so we are coming through with some of those coughs and things like that as well too. But this is also going to keep the team focused on what's coming up, what matters, that you are paying attention to those items, and be eye-opening to the fact that, hey, we've had all of these issues. If you think that you're safe and you've done everything you needed to, the data might show otherwise, or you can really use it as a supporting factor to say, guys, we have been fantastic as far as following all of these safety processes that we've wanted to do. I really respect everyone's commitment, and who knows, an incentive program or whatever, you can do whatever you like from there. The last thing I'd highlight in there, for those of you that it matters from like an equipment perspective, don't skip the equipment piece as a whole. This is one of the biggest things, especially if you're driving vehicles, you need to do. We have the OSHA, or not the OSHA, the Department of Transportation, pre-trip inspection, post-trip inspection, all on here as well too. Make this part of their routine. This is part of the consistency as well. Anytime you get in a truck, run through a quick inspection. Anytime you do XYZ, we're going to need you to inspect that forklift, crane, ladder, whatever it is. What does that do? Not only, it might only take them 30 seconds to do an inspection of a truck or something like that, but the first thing they do before they get in that truck, before they get in that boom lift, before they get in that scissor lift, whatever it might be, crane, whatever, the first thing they're thinking is safety. So not only are you building in consistency, but you're making that part of their process. The first thing I'm thinking, if I don't have to do inspection, great. They're jumping in the car, pulling up their phone, talking about, did you see the sale Arby's has later? I can't wait to go get, 5 for $5 roast beefs. We're going to stop by at lunch, whatever it might be. That's not a plug for Arby's. But the point is if the first thing you have them do is focus on safety, that's going to bring that mindset into safer drivers, safer activities on the actual equipment that you're using and what have you. Now, we have a lot of tools in here where as soon as I complete an inspection on this piece of equipment, that's actually going to tie back to that equipment hub. You'll see who has inspected what. You can actually track and manage what equipment items are assigned to whom. You can see when those items are expected, and you can see the whole history of those pieces of equipment as far as what's overdue inspection. Let's see all of my inspections. Let's see all of my repair requests. You can track and manage all this, and then you can also use this tool as a way to notify your garage or your mechanic that you're having an issue with a particular piece of equipment as well. So that's the forums. Again, there's a lot that we can do in Safety HQ, but this is not a Safety HQ demo per se, so we can talk about that later if you guys have any questions. Safety data sheets, everybody's favorite topic. Make these readily accessible for the guys, right? Again, this is a digital library, so it's really easy to search for what you're looking for. You can pull it up, you can access that as you go. The teams can review those items and see them in real time. But make sure that these are relevant. Make sure you remind the team where you can access these items. They need to be on the job site. I think that's number one. If they're in the truck, if they're in the office, they don't help your guys from knowing that that's there. Have the team go in there every once in a while. I've seen some folks hide a $5 bill in there on occasion and say, hey, you know what? It doesn't hurt to check in. So maybe you get some guys slipping through there on occasion. It's really hard for me to tell you guys that, the SDSs are going to be sexy and the guys need to know. Just make sure you know where they're at. Make sure you're up to date. A tool like this is really good at keeping these all up to date for you in here in one searchable, sortable, organizable area. And it's on their phone, it's on their tablet. It's not, 5 stories down in a truck. So, as far as creating consistency and driving down insurance costs, one of the big keys that you can do is manage trainings for your employees. Having your employees well trained is going to not only keep them on the job site and keep them active, but it's also going to lower your insurance costs if you show that your team is readily and up to date on a regular basis on their trainings. You can do that here by creating trainings. You can assign those out. You can meet the OSHA requirement of validation of knowledge transfer or verification of knowledge transfer by creating quizzes and things like that. Great, that's all in one place. That's all going to actually tie back into the certifications area where we can track who's completed what certifications, what trainings, and when. This will send you reminders as to certifications expiring and things along those lines. Again, the biggest thing that I see is, hey, yeah, we have a spreadsheet and these folks are expired, what have you. If you let people expire on their trainings and you don't get on them and you don't remind them that this is coming up, you're de-emphasizing the importance of that training. So having some tools, whether it's this, whether if it's even in a really, really basic form of Excel, you still show and can connect with your employees and say, hey, Joe, you're about to expire on your first aid CPR in 2 months. Do you have a plan to get that done? Or maybe you guys provide some training or what have you. It shows that this is top of mind. This is something that matters, and this is something that they need to be mindful of. If they know, hey, I did a CPR training, I'm probably 3 years expired. Well, then my boss, my foreman, my project manager, the owner probably doesn't think it's that important. So keeping the team up to date on these types of things is not only good for lowering insurance costs, it's not only good for keeping your team safe and keeping them in a safety mindset and obviously educating them on things that they need to know, but it's a really good way to emphasize, a safety focus throughout your business and your organization. There's a lot that we could do in incident reports in here as far as reporting. We could even do an OSHA log in here for you. There's a lot of things on those sides, but that's probably more of a demo conversation separately. I would just like to focus in on a couple of more things before we kind of head out of here at the half-hour mark. And I know we got a handful of questions in here that we'll make sure we can get to as well. And then we'll let you guys get back to your lunch or what have you. Actually, you know what? I see a question. I just happened to pop into the question, but this question is really good for what I was going to talk about next, as far as creating consistent processes. So this is from Darrell. I apologize either way. Darrell's asking, hey, I'd like to implement these policies, but my team has been doing things the same way and consistently for years. I got a few jokesters and they're not super motivated and have dismissed safety activities when we've implemented them before. Any tips, techniques, what have you? That's a great example. And this brings up a lot of things, right? Like, and I use this example in a lot of different calls. If they make a joke on the toolbox talk the first time you do it, all right, it gets a bunch of laughs, whatever. If they make a joke the next day when they do it, and it's probably going to get a couple less laughs. Eventually, that team, and if it's productive, great. That's livens up the conversation your team's having collectively. But if they're not getting into those items and they're making that joke on a regular basis, eventually you're just going to wear them down with making this consistent, making part of the process. If they win and say, we don't need to do this, whatever. Again, it's showing that safety is not a big focus. But eventually, they're just going to tire themselves out. It's going to be played out. They're not going to want to be a knucklehead every time you do a toolbox talk. If they know every single Monday morning that group is going to smack them upside the head and say, buddy, we just want to get through this. We want to focus on what we need to, and we need to get on with our day. So that's one of the big items that we've seen is consistency. Consistency is absolutely the best way to deal with a lot of those items. And I have had a lot of folks that get into individual conversations with those folks. That's a really good way to point that out. I mean, you guys know your groups better than I do, but one of the big things that comes up is, well, hey, maybe I can pull this up as a whole too. Hey, every time we seem to have these toolbox talks, it seems like you're not focused. It seems like you're not really attentive and focused on the team. A really good way to mention that is, it's really important for a lot of guys, and they've expressed to us that they really care about being safe. They have families. I know it's not the sexiest thing or, the machoest thing, what have you, but at the end of the day, that is true, and your team would agree with that their number one priority is to get home safe. They don't want any accidents, and if the expense of that is somebody being a knucklehead, that's going to wear really thin. And when they put those things in perspective, the jokes really just kind of lay off, and people really kind of buy in a little bit more. That goes to a larger conversation, especially when we start talking about ramping up for the busy season and things along those lines. It's hard enough to find people. You need your folks here. You need to keep them safe from accidents. But even more importantly, use safety as not only a business tool that you can use to win new business. Again, having professional safety practices shows GCs and other subcontractors that you mean business, that you are a professional organization. You can be trusted with the work that you're being asked, and that you are going, just like anything else. If you're an electrician and you're being asked to wire this building, you can trust me with the job you're asking me to do. Safety to production, whatever, beginning to end, we can help you with those items. The name on the truck, the name on the front door is a name that you can trust to take care of what you need. So presenting that through safety is a really huge component. you'd be surprised how much business that will win you when they realize, hey, I don't have to worry about, J. Allen Construction or, Elite Wiring or whatever. They're going to take care of their business. I give them what they need. They can roll. I'll hire them back again. I'll hire them every single time. So it's a really good way to win new business, keep business, what have you. But especially when we talk about from an employee perspective, it is a really good way to retain talent, especially if folks are coming and going seasonally. If you have a hard time with turnover and people leaving on a regular basis, if they look and say, hey, this company really values safety, I know that they value that I'm going to be here day in and day out. Employees want to work with other safe employees. And if they see somebody being a knucklehead on the job site and potentially putting them at risk, they're not going to want to come back to that work site. They're not going to want to come back to you as an employer as a whole. So it is a huge, huge boon for your retention amongst employees, as well as your professionalism in many cases, very small markets where you're probably going to know a lot of the same contractors as well. I know I'm kind of at time here, but there are a couple of good questions that I wanted to get to as well too. So I think I'll get to like 3 or 4 more for those of you guys that want to hang on a little bit after the time mark, but happy to help and answer any other questions. Actually, I'll kind of probably bring that up here. If you guys have any other questions, reach out there, or you can connect with me at any time here too. So Lindsay is asking, all right, Lindsay, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, but Lindsay's looking at necessarily where do I want to start with a safety process and how can I build off of that? It's piece by piece, right? For Safety HQ, we do a really good job of kind of like hand holding you and getting you through that process. Even if you already have an established safety program, we can work you through that as well too, and we can match the system to meet your needs. But we also have really good structures and templates and things like that in place to get you to where you need to go. If you're not using Safety HQ and you just want to do this in a business separately or what have you, start small. Start with one thing. Maybe it might be too much to throw a JHA, a site inspection, and a toolbox talk at them if you've done nothing safety related before. Start with a regular toolbox talk. Make a goal to when you're going to start implementing a weekly JHA, and then you could do it daily, things along those lines. So it can be incremental. You can get the team to buy in, and in that way, if you do it piece by piece, you can certainly focus in on, how can we improve some of these processes, and how can we go from there too. So it's like eating an elephant, just one bite at a time. You don't necessarily have to take the whole thing in at once and have this up to date. If you're close and you got a lot of parts and pieces in place and you just need to kind of make it a little bit more efficient, that's a different story. We can kind of streamline that, but I would say start with something small. Maybe pick a toolbox talk, maybe pick a weekly site inspection for your foreman or your project managers to do, and go from there. I've implemented safety programs in the past. I've had difficulty with my team buying in. This can change a few different ways, guys. Safety HQ is not going to make your team, fully compliant on safety. It is a process. It is a software that will help with your processes, even if you're doing this offline and separately as well. I've seen incentive programs work. I've seen just simply, hey, we are following up on this on a regular basis. If you just simply outlast them to make sure you do it, you get through the month mark is typically where I see these items, a month, month and a half. Once you get to about 6 weeks of doing this on a regular basis, on paper, in a system like this, then that's when the team realizes, okay, well, this is here to stay. I better just start doing what I need to do. And that'll keep you on task. And they start to develop routines, things along those lines as well. Safety HQ is a huge benefit for that because we can make those really efficient. It's really easy to track and see who's doing what those items are. Doesn't mean it's the only way to do some of those items, but staying on top of them, remaining consistent, and pursuing that over a longer time period is important. I'm going to get to this last question here, guys. I'm sorry, there's about 4 or 5 that I haven't gotten a chance to get to. But this is going to be from Kyle. I think Kyle and I have worked together previously, but if it's the wrong Kyle, I apologize. Kyle's asking as a whole here too. He's got some foremen and things along those lines that are not super tech savvy. How would I implement something along those lines here? Totally get it. Safety HQ, this is going to be a little bit more on Safety HQ focused. Safety HQ is focused and intended only for folks in construction. As you noticed, it is the big yellow button. We want to make this simple and easy to use. Even if you guys find a different safety software out there, I don't care how many data points that are out there. I don't care how snazzy it is and how cool it looks. If this thing is not easy to use, if the paper form that you give your employees is not simple and easy to follow, it's software, whatever, they are not going to do it. We need this to be simple. We need this to be direct to the point and kind of cut out a lot of the frills. You can always add more items later, especially if you're implementing something initially. Start with something small and build out from there. Again, in Safety HQ, we have the ability to make these forms smart and kind of tweak these as you go, which is a huge, huge buy-in for a lot of these folks that, especially if you're doing it from paper, they're going to save a bunch of time moving to digital. But that's a huge component to keep in mind as you go forward as well. That's all I think I got for time for today, guys. I know I ran a little bit over. I'm happy to help if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns. I think we will be sending out this this presentation afterwards. Happy to help with any questions or items that you might need from there. But we really appreciate your time today. Please stay safe. Even if it's questions outside the software, just things, hey guys, how can we help? We got a lot of folks that have been doing this, especially focused on safety for a long time. We'd be happy to help. Throw any questions that you might have over to us and see what we can do. Other than that, take care, guys. Appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you soon.